My name is Jordan Harrell from Professor Kleiss's CGST 225010 Scientific Methods in Criminal Justice course, and today I'll be presenting my research study on determining if there is a significant relationship between poverty and committing theft. So to start, it is important to mention that the central research problem of this study is to determine if poverty has any influence on causing crime. Meanwhile, the topic of study relating to that problem is determining if there is a significant relationship between poverty and committing theft. The sampling strategy being used for the purpose of this research is purposive or judgmental sample technique with a cross-sectional research design. Now, why should you care? You should care about this research because this research study has the potential to answer questions and solve the unknown surrounding poverty and committing larceny. The research question for this study is there a significant relationship between poverty and committing theft? Answering questions surrounding the topics of poverty and larceny will give a more detailed and accurate information regarding the relationship the two share with one another. And with this information, it allows us as a society to find solutions to problems surrounding this. One of which could be, how can we go about preventing children in low-income households from becoming more likely to eventually become at-risk individuals? This is one of the many questions that can be answered as a result of the information gathered from this research study. However, there are many more to be answered, and for that reason, I believe that you should care about the results of this research study. After conducting further research on the topics surrounding poverty and committing larceny, I came across certain research articles where I gathered valuable information on the topic. It is crucial to note that according to Crivel and Peterson, most disadvantaged neighborhoods have heightened levels of crime because the conditions that encourage criminal behavior are particularly pronounced, and mechanisms of social control that discourage crime are particularly lacking. Adding on to this, according to Wilson, the growth of neighborhood with extreme levels of poverty has created conditions that isolate residents from mainstream society and tie them to a local setting of multiple disadvantages. Drawing on this argument, scholars have explored the association between concentrated poverty and various types of deviance, such as drug use, teenage childbearing, and violent crime. I believe that these conclusions from these research articles pave the way for future research studies, such as the one that I am conducting, and present extremely valuable information relating to this research topic. The next study we'll be focusing on is a research in the study that came from Daniel Yates that examined the relationship between the composition and distribution of poverty on city-level violent and property crime offenses. There were three methodological approaches used to investigate this relationship. The first focused on many U.S. cities throughout the year 2000, while the second approach used a longitudinal analysis that focused on the relationship between poverty and crime relationship between the years of 1970 and 2000. A descriptive analysis documented changes in the cities of Seattle and Baltimore for the years 1970, 1980, and 1990 were also included in the study. The results of the research indicated that cities can experience both increases and decreases in crime due to changes in the composition and distribution of poverty. Adding on to that, it was also concluded that more affluent cities were found to be more likely to increase in crime as a result of these changes. There is also some evidence to show that violent crime can persist in certain areas of a given city, despite changes in the compositional and distributional features of poverty across the city. Gamaya Birnpong's research should also be a topic of conversation, as her research suggests that crime rates are generally higher in poor neighborhoods than the affluent ones in America. Because of this, it is believed that high rates of crime in low-income neighborhoods gives the idea that people in lower-income neighborhoods have a higher likelihood for crime than their counterparts in high-income neighborhoods. While Verratti states that the theoretical link between income inequality, poverty, and violent crime has a long and well-established history, he also says that evidence to date can best be described as mixed. Hipp and Yates' study estimates that the functional form of the relationship between poverty and various types of serious crime in a sample of census tract for 25 cities, and that a diminishing positive effect is most appropriately characterized this relationship. Thus, No evidence is found that supports the idea that neighborhoods with very high levels of poverty will experience an exponentially high rate of crime compared to other neighborhoods. The purpose of Muhammad's research is to analyze and find out the impact of poverty on crime in the United States of America. The outcomes in this research showed that a positive relationship between poverty and property crime. It can be argued that poverty ultimately leads property crime in the long run in the USA. However, unemployment and gross domestic product did not show neither a long-term nor a short-term relationship with property crime during this period of the study. Nawakoro, Marshall, and Mittal's research discuss issues that link poverty to crimes in the restrictive and dualistic environments within counties in the United States. The county that was being tested for this research was labeled as a high poverty and crime environment. In 2008, 25.3% of the county's residents were below the poverty income level. This estimate is higher than the respective estimate of 14.7% at the state of Georgia's level and the county's 2000 poverty rate of 24.8% declined slightly to 22.3% in 2010. Eventually, it was concluded that poverty seemed to reflect the county's unemployment rate that increased from 6.9% in 2008 to 10.2% in 2009. After reading Strzelecki, Schuck, and Hogan's research, they concluded that a system of values emerges in which crime, disorder, and drug use are less than properly condemned, and due to that, are expected to be a part of everyday life. According to the authors, these ecologically structured social perception and tolerances in turn appear to influence the probability of criminal outcomes and harmful deviant behavior. Lastly, Patterson concluded that the lack of some fixed level of material goods necessary for survival and minimum well-being causes criminal activity on a personal level as well as on a property level and increasingly high in an area. Now, moving on to the research conducted by myself. It is important to note valuable details about this research. The first of many would be how my population for this research would be 250 former convicted criminals who were sentenced for varying levels of larceny. Next, I will be sampling people who were formerly convicted of larceny charges, and the sampling strategy I will be using is purposive or judgmental sampling technique. I chose this as my sampling strategy of choice because this sampling strategy is one that works best when the researcher is trying to gather information from the target population for the purpose of their study, and that is one of my goals for this research, making a perfect fit. This sampling strategy will be one where the participants are gathered by first having the researchers contact the United States Probation Office and requested a list of recently convicted people for the crime of larceny for research. Once this list has finally been gathered, researchers will go down the list searching for potential participants and request the assistance of these participants by calling their phone numbers and offering $100 for participating in this research. Instruments that I will be using for the purpose of this study include giving a survey to all participants. I plan on ensuring that every participant is asked questions to learn the relationship between poverty and committing larceny and how poverty has affected their lives. I will give surveys to determine how poverty has affected criminals' lives by asking them if they had any untreated mental illnesses, did they have a lack of jobs, did they associate with any gangs, did they have a lack of educational opportunities, did they suffer from alcohol and drug abuse, and were their basic needs not met. These questions will give me details about the participants' lives at the time and before they committed the larceny, and give me an idea if there was any relationship between the participants' answers. It is also worth noting that my study design of choice for this experiment will be a cross-sectional study. I plan the secondary data that I will be retrieving from the United States Probation Office will be gathering the lists of names of former convicted larcenists from correctional institutions for the purpose of this research, while specific data elements that I will be collecting will be the responses from their initial survey of participants, which will be compared to the other variables responses. The research variables for this experiment are race, age, gender, and degree of larceny committed, and I intend to measure these variables based on the number of each participant within each variable and their initial survey question answer responses. I do not see any issues regarding ethical standards surrounding this case because I will ensure that all participants are doing so voluntarily. Safety is a necessity for all parties involved, and confidentiality will be key. Confidentiality will be ensured by having the names and personal information of all participants completely blocked out throughout the entirety of the research. I will inform participants of their rights by giving them written consent documents before they take part in the initial survey, and also verbally inform them of the right to deny answering any questions, as well as the right to leave the study at any point without any possible penalty. In order to get my data and conduct my research, I will first have to gather a list of people who are formally convicted of larceny charges from a United States Probation Office in New Haven office at 157 Church Street, New Haven, Connecticut. Once the information has been gathered, researchers will hand out an initial survey to participants, and once that has been concluded, they will collect the data from the survey and compare results based on each variable to gather their first conclusions. Participants are simply given an initial survey when they are asked a series of questions relating to our research focus. The survey should take about 10 minutes, and researchers will hand out a survey to participants. Once that is concluded, they will collect the data from the survey and compare results based on each variable to gather conclusions. Controls implemented in this experiment in order to ensure confounds are avoided include having a rapport between the participant and researchers in order to gain each other's trust and ensure validity and reliability for the entirety of the experiment. Secondary data that will be retrieved from the United States Probation Office will be gathering the list of names from former convicted larcenists from correctional institutions for the purpose of this research. I expect to find more details surrounding the relationship shared between poverty and larceny. My hypothesis is that there will be a significant relationship found between the two, and I believe that the suggestions that could arise from the potential research or results of my research is that there is a shared relationship between poverty and larceny, or rather there is not a shared relationship between the two. The results of this research could influence programs, methods, and/or forms of intervention specifically related to larceny and poverty. Lots of research articles I found while researching went into depth about the shared relationship between crime and poverty, but not much was found for the larceny, specifically in poverty. I believe that the results of my research have the potential to open up eyes about the influence poverty could truly have on committing larceny crimes. The results of this research can contribute to the solution to social and economic problems within our country because learning more about how poverty can influence crime, specifically larceny in this case, has the potential to change general knowledge surrounding poverty. By this, I am specifically talking about how if more people are aware about how larceny can be influenced by poverty, perhaps steps can actually be taken in the criminal justice field to properly handle criminals who live in poverty. Now, lastly, limitations to my research design would have to be how it is possible for participants to simply lie in their survey, which would result in inaccurate results and conclusions for this experiment. For this research, I plan on conducting a rapport between researchers and participants, as well as offering $100 for participating in the research in an attempt to make the study more reliable. Some of the difficulties in trying to study this topic include how while there was previous research articles stating how they researched the shared relationship between poverty and crime or criminal activities, there are not many articles that specifically talk in depth about larceny and how poverty could have a possible relationship with it.